I think is going to be really important to identify is how do you feel about feeling? What emotions do you have about emotions? Because again, in the Western culture, or Western society, at least again in the U.S., at least during my generation, emotions were not a hot topic. they were not a topic. In fact, if you emoted at all, especially as a guy, you immediately were told again and again, at least in my experience, emotions will get you nowhere. Crying gets you nowhere. Emoting is for girls. That was literally some of the messaging that I received when I was a kid, and not even necessarily from my parents, but from my environment. I went to public school, and played all kinds of sports and that kind of thing. And anybody that expressed any emotion, any kid, any guy that expressed any kind of emotion other than anger, which oddly enough, anger is a more acceptable emotion for guys. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why I haven't done a study on that, but any other emotion other than expressing anger was looked down upon. And then only a certain amount of anger was kind of allowable. You had this really kind of small window of anger that was acceptable, and then anything else was unacceptable. And so we wonder why there's so many men and women that are still emotional 5-year-olds or very emotionally mature. That's why. What is going on, EQ gangsters? Hope you all are doing amazing sauce today. Thank you for joining us today, whether it may be the YouTube channel, the podcast. So great having you. Thanks for again letting me be a part of your emotional growth journey and you being a part of my emotional growth journey. Hope you all are able to learn some stuff from the junk in my trunk and my failures and lessons that I'm learning along the way as I continue my very consistent emotional fitness program. And again, remember that there's no amount of degrees or certifications that will compensate for a low EQ. No titles, no chief executive officer, chief operating officer, senior vice president, none of that. I have met lots of people that are emotionally unhealthy, have areas of their EQ that's very low in spite of their title, their degree, the psychologists, y'all, psychiatrists, counselors, therapists. Just because they have that title does not mean they're emotionally healthy. They may have some intellectual knowledge. They may have lots of knowledge regarding a particular content or topic, does not mean they are emotionally healthy. That's why I encourage everybody, if you are not on an emotional fitness program, a consistent emotional fitness program, I strongly, highly encourage you do that. And again, you get out of it what you put into it. So if you do 5 push-ups a day, that's consistency is great. 5 push-ups may be a little bit low. It's a great place to start your emotional fitness program, your physical fitness program, right? Same thing with emotional fitness program. Do what you feel like you're able to in the amount that you're able to do. Be safe, right? Feel, but also to realize that your emotional fitness program, while you do need to feel safe with your emotional fitness program, it does not mean that you're going to feel comfortable. Big difference there. I'll probably do a whole other episode on that at some point, but the difference between being safe and being comfortable. So you do need to feel safe in your emotional fitness program. You probably will not feel comfortable. Again, just like a physical fitness program, you need to feel safe doing a physical fitness program. But if you're sweating and you're going to feel sore, right? There's going to be some aspects of that physical fitness program. For me, doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I just rolled with a couple guys yesterday. That I don't have many guys that are my size doing Jiu-Jitsu. I'm 6'1". Right now I'm probably 260, 265. And I'm working on getting that down. And these guys were literally the same. One guy was 6'1", 265. The other guy was probably 6'5", foot and probably 275, 280, and both of them better than me. So it was no joke. It's no joke, right? So it's uncomfortable, but I felt safe because they are technical enough. One guy was a purple belt, one guy was a blue belt with 2 stripes, which is the same rank as me, but he's got a wrestling background, so he's more technical than me and everything. But anyway, I felt safe because even though they're bigger and stronger and younger than me, they know how to roll safely so that they're not going to hurt their training partner. So again, very similarly, let me tell you, it was very uncomfortable rolling with them, but I still felt safe. So same thing with your emotional fitness program. It's going to be uncomfortable, but you do want to feel safe. So, and you are in control of the pace and speed that you go at in your emotional fitness program. So that's, it's really important, right, to consider, what is safe, and then really identifying, are you even aware of the emotions, the difference, the nuance of emotion of safety versus discomfort? Again, big difference. Now, there's a point, again, using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, let's say someone gets me in an arm lock. In fact, I rolled my daughter yesterday. She is very fast with her arm bars and her transitions. And, for me, I have my style of Jiu-Jitsu is very slow. I don't have any fast movements at all. You are going to know where I'm going. I'm like I think it's Flash in Zootopia, the sloth. That's my Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu style. My daughter is very fast. She's like Dash in The Incredibles. And so, she jumped on an arm bar, on an arm lock, and I thankfully have done it long enough to tap quick enough. But if I had not tapped, no joke, she would have potentially snapped my elbow. And so, because of how fast she is. And so, are you aware of, but then another example, again, the one guy who was probably, 10, 15 pounds bigger than me, he was able to sweep me and he got on top. And now I'm very comfortable on the bottom, but again, I'm not usually rolling with big guys. And so it was very uncomfortable being on the bottom, but again, I felt safe. So, and I was never really threatened by any particular chokes or locks, joint locks. And so it was tough to breathe because this guy knows how to use his body pressure, his body size. Not everyone, just because they're big, that doesn't mean that they know how to use their body. And so it's important in your emotional fitness journey to really understand that nuance of what does it feel like to feel unsafe versus what does it feel like to feel discomfort. White belts, I will tell you, do not know. It's a much finer line. They don't know the difference a lot of times between feeling unsafe and feeling uncomfortable. A lot of times they equate it to be the same thing. For example, for me, again, my game is the pressure game because of my size, and now I've learned how to use my body and that kind of thing in strategic places on the body, to add more pressure and weight and discomfort. But what I tell a lot of the white belts is, so when I get on top, in let's say even side control, or it's called the mount position, I can adjust how I feel on their body to increase or decrease pressure. Many white belts, as soon as I get on top and they feel the size, just how, 6'1", 260, 265 on top of them, a lot of them will immediately go into fight, flight, or freeze mode, and they will panic. And so, of course, I will immediately get up and say, hey, look, are you okay? Is everything all right? And of course, I'm paying hyper attention to social awareness, to how they're responding. So initially, when I get on top, so go from side control, then go into the mount position, I will kind of start slow and just see how they're adjusting to my pressure. And if I see that they're starting to spaz very early, of course I'll stop and, hey, check in with them real quick. Hey, how are you doing? You all right? And in some cases they are. I say, okay, well, I'm going to keep putting a little bit more pressure on just to kind of start to get comfortable or familiar with this pressure. If they say, no, man, I'm kind of freaking out right now, no sweat. I'll immediately get off of them and we'll start over again where they start inside controller mount. So, and the same thing can happen, right, with if you're an emotional white belt. If you're new to emotional growth, emotional fitness, emotional health, you may that line between safety and discomfort may be very, very small, very thin, and you may get that feeling, oh snap, I'm starting to feel emotions. And it was for me, again, being honest with you, it was very much that dynamic for me. When I was brand new, I was terrified. So that's something, if you haven't even done that yet, what emotions do you have around emotional fitness? Write down those emotions. And again, if you need, you can Google the emotion wheel, and there'll be a number of different examples of emotion wheels that will pop up, and it'll be 3 concentric circles. In the middle will be some larger, bigger emotions, and then the second ring, the middle ring, will look like those bigger emotions broke down into smaller, more nuanced emotions. And that third ring, it's broken down even more. Those inner circle, bigger emotions are broken down even further into that third rung of that emotion wheel. Write down the emotions that you have regarding emotional fitness and emotional growth and emotions. What emotions do you have about emotions? And I wish I had someone like me to listen to when I was starting my emotional growth journey, because I had no idea what this journey was going to look like. I had no concept. It was literally it was going on patrol at night. I'm using my infantry background here. It was literally like, and I did part of this in Ranger School. We had when I remember it was in Florida, the Florida phase specifically, well, in mountains was terrible too, but Florida phase, there was zero illumination during portions of that phase. In fact, I don't know that there was much illumination during that phase at all. So that what that means is there are certain nights, seasons, right, of the month, periods of the month, where where the moon is right. During a full moon, you got tons of illumination, so you can see actually quite well at night. There are also phases of the moon where there's you got the sliver of the moon where you've got little to no illumination, so you really cannot see your hand in front of your face kind of level, right? That's how I felt when I first started my emotional growth journey. I had no idea what one foot in front of the other even looked like. The emotions I had about my emotions when I first started this journey was fear, terror, unknown, confusion, concerned, uncomfortable, unsafe, horror, uncertainty, insufficiency, incompetent, all very, very unpleasant emotions. And thank God I started this journey with a counselor, because even though it wasn't emotional intelligence or emotional health specific counseling, it was enough of a handhold. So he was kind of holding my hand as I was going through my journey, my growth journey, that it got me through that initial feeling of terror as I started the journey. It's important because if you have lots of uncomfortable, or maybe even like in my case, only uncomfortable emotions about emotions, that's going to impact your journey and whether or not you even want to continue or even begin an emotional fitness program. So that is something that I think is going to be really important to identify, is how do you feel about feeling? What emotions do you have about emotions? Because again, in the Western culture, a Western society, at least again in the U.S., at least during my generation, emotions were not a hot topic. They were not a topic. In fact, if you emoted at all, especially as a guy, you immediately were told, again and again, at least in my experience, emotions will get you nowhere. Crying gets you nowhere. Emoting is for girls. That was literally some of the messaging that I received when I was a kid, and not even necessarily from my parents, but from my environment. I went to public school, and played all kinds of sports and that kind of thing. And anybody that expressed any emotion, any kid, any guy that expressed any kind of emotion other than anger, which oddly enough, anger is a more acceptable emotion for guys. It's kind of interesting. I don't know why I haven't done a study on that, but any other emotion other than expressing anger was looked down upon. And then only a certain amount of anger was kind of allowable. You had this really kind of small window of anger that was acceptable, and then anything else was unacceptable. And so we wonder why there's so many men and women that are still emotional 5-year-olds or very emotionally mature. That's why. But how many of us have been trained on how to, here's my definition of emotional intelligence, how to identify, acknowledge, process, or manage your own emotions, let alone the emotions of anyone else. And we wonder why there's so much toxic leadership, toxic cultures, toxic environments out there. The vast majority of people today have never been trained on how to manage or handle emotions, especially a lot of the leaders. A lot of the leaders today are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, maybe in some cases 70s, that have never been trained on this stuff. But yet they're leading and running large divisions, departments, organizations, teams, still potentially very emotionally unhealthy. And so, again, I recommend everybody, that's this episode is on starting and continuing an emotional fitness program. Now, again, if you're an emotional white belt, or again, you've never gone running before, if you've never gone physically running, well, doing a marathon tomorrow is not going to be a smart idea. So begin your emotional fitness program at the pace, at the frequency, at the quantity that you feel you can manage and sustain. Just try to pay attention to the nuance between, again, feeling safe or unsafe, feeling comfort or discomfort. And in fact, here's another exercise that you can do. Write down a list of activities where recently even you can even do two different, break this down even two different ways, recently and even in the past. What are some times, events, activities that you have done where you felt safe? What are some times, activities, events, experiences where you felt unsafe? Separately, what are some times where you have felt comfortable? What are some times in your past, again, whether it's with people, experiences, events, where you have felt uncomfortable? And then mix and match, try to figure out, because there's going to be some overlap. There's going to be some experiences that you've had where you felt, here's an example. I rolled with a guy early on. This was when I was a white belt. So I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to appropriately defend myself. And there was a gentleman who was rolling that had some emotional issues. He was going through some very, very tough times emotionally. I didn't know this at the time. And the way his emotions showed up was in jiu-jitsu as being very, very aggressive. Now, I will tell you, that's very, very rare. For anyone who has done jiu-jitsu or wants to try out jiu-jitsu, please try it out. This story that I'm telling you, again, this is literally the only time I think that I've ever felt uncomfortable and unsafe rolling with somebody. And no, there's one other guy that I can think of in 5 years. So 2 guys where I did not feel comfortable. The other guy didn't necessarily have emotional issues that I was aware of. Well, I take that back. And this guy was a senior blue belt when I was a white belt. This other guy, he had this little thing called ego and pride that he wanted to demonstrate his value and importance by dominating the younger belts, the lower belts. And again, so only 2 guys in my 5 years that I felt uncomfortable and unsafe. But go through, when you've got those lists, those 4 lists, right? The safe and unsafe are 2 different lists. Comfortable and uncomfortable, 2 different lists. So a total of 4 lists there. Start making the connection between, okay, here's the times where I was uncomfortable, but I still felt safe. Okay, here's a couple times where I was uncomfortable and unsafe. And see if you could unpack some of those emotions. What were the emotions that were going on around those experiences? And really, because what you want to do is set yourself up for your emotional fitness program in the best way possible. You don't want to start off your emotional fitness program feeling uncomfortable and unsafe. Because in that regard, right, our survival mechanism kicks in. As humans, we naturally avoid pain and discomfort. And so if you go into it kind of thinking and feeling like, okay, this is going to be uncomfortable and unsafe, of course, your brain is going to, danger, Will Robinson, we need to avoid this at all costs. The alarm bells are going to go off and you're not going to begin or continue an emotional fitness program. So that's really important. And then also, so not just emotions, now the next level of exercise is, what are the stories around emotions? What are your stories? What are those core beliefs maybe that you were raised with as a kid? What were you told about emotions as a kid? What were you told about emotions as a kid? What were the stories that you were told about emotions? Were you allowed to emote? Were you allowed to express emotion? How were those that cared for you, parents, siblings, coaches, teachers, how did they respond when you expressed emotion? How did you express emotion? Did you express emotion appropriately or inappropriately? Why, if in the event that you expressed emotions inappropriately, how was that received? How, did someone gorilla stomp you? Did someone try to coach you lovingly and mentor you through that experience? We all develop our emotional foundations in our childhoods. Lottie-dottie, everybody. I don't care if you're 55. I don't care if you're 25. I don't care if you're 75. Lottie-dottie, everybody develops our emotional foundations from and in and through our childhoods. And if you have not gone back and done some work, or if you have not done some work about what your emotional foundation looks like as a result of your childhood, there's a really, really good chance that you're going to have some cracks and crevices and fractures within your emotional foundation that are playing out in some form or fashion in your life, in your leadership, in your home life, personally and professionally. And so the stories, what stories have you developed around your emotions, around emoting, around feeling? This is so important homework, y'all, when you are evaluating and beginning and or continuing an emotional fitness program. This prep work, and maybe you hold on to this episode, or you save this particular episode, or you pause it and write down all the questions that I've presented, and do these exercises, y'all. There are no amount of emotional exercises, emotional push-ups, emotional sit-ups that are going to work if you don't do them. Just like physical fitness. I can watch YouTube videos on how to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I can listen to podcasts on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Until I get on the mats consistently, my Jiu-Jitsu will never improve. Similarly, our emotional fitness program, our emotional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program, is not going to improve at all. I could teach you an arm bar. I could teach you rear naked choke. I could teach you an arm triangle. I can teach you a regular triangle. I could teach you all the moves that I know, which is not that many. But I could teach you the handful of moves that I know. none of them are going to work for you if you don't work them. So anyway, that's something to keep in mind as you, again, either begin and or continue your emotional fitness journey, is really do a deep dive, an assessment, an audit, an emotional foundation audit. Here's another one, another part of the exercise that you can do is, where did you get your emotional foundation from? Who are the primary contributors to your emotional foundation in your life? Dad, mom, brother, sister, teacher, coach, grandma, grandpa, uncle, aunt. Who was it? Cousin. Who was it in your life that contributed to your emotional foundation the most? And then what was the impact that list those people out? Maybe there's 5 people, maybe there's 10 people, maybe there's 20 people, maybe there's 3 people. What was the emotional impact of mom in your life, in your emotional foundation? What was the emotional impact of your dad? What was the emotional impact of your sister, of your brother? There's so many stories I could tell you of people that have been impacted. We've all been impacted by, again, people in our childhood. I know one of my clients I'm working with is very senior, the most senior IT executive in his company. And he was greatly affected and impacted by his older brothers. He was the youngest in his family, and a tremendous amount of his emotional foundation was from his older brothers and from his mother. Good and bad, positive and negative. And so it's important to pay attention to those nuances. Again, what did you learn from your mother? What did you learn from your father, from your brothers, your sisters, coaches, that kind of thing, the people that had an impact, emotional impact on your life? What was that impact? Was it net positive? Was it net negative? And here's the deal. What happened to you as kids, y'all, is not your fault, but it is your responsibility to grow, heal, and change from. What happened to you as kids, what happened to us as children, is not our fault, but it is our responsibility to heal, grow, and change from. So save this episode and maybe share it with some friends. If you have some friends or family members or colleagues that you feel will get some value out of kind of understanding this baseline of where their emotional foundation, comes from, and doing an emotional foundation audit before beginning their own emotional fitness program, I think is going to be super important. So again, I would love it if you would share it, because here's a passion of mine: helping as many leaders become as emotionally healthy as possible on the planet. If you change you can change your world, and then we can change the world. So by helping change leaders themselves, by starting and continuing their own emotional fitness program, that will lead to better homes, better families, better parents, better children, better companies, better cultures, better results, better outcomes, more income, more goals, more dreams, etc., etc., etc. But that change starts with each of us individually. So for me, part of my own emotional fitness program, honestly, is this podcast. I am growing and learning and sharing my lessons from my failures and insights and stuff as I'm working with. Right now, I've got about 75 leaders that I am coaching professionally. And I think I've told you guys before, is a huge blessing from God. Let's see, of the 5 or 6 corporate clients that I have, 3 of those are multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm working with executives. That's all a blessing. None of that would have happened if I had not started my emotional growth journey. And so God allowed a whole series of events to happen, and many of you guys have heard my story before, that allowed me to start and continue this emotional growth journey. Once I saw, after 2 years of daily emotional fitness program for me, all of the big rocks in my life started to change and improve. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my finances, my fitness, my businesses, everything changed and improved for the better as a result of my emotional fitness program. 2 years into it, I'm like, babe, I can't believe that all of these changes and improvements have happened as a result of getting healthier emotionally. And I was stuck like Chuck in all those different areas of my life because of my emotional dysfunction. I've got to start a podcast, boom, and YouTube channel sharing the lessons that I've learned in hopes that it may help improve somebody else's life, because I can't be the only emotionally clueless guy out there. Also, as a result of my emotional growth journey and my continued emotional fitness program, we started the EQ Mafia as well, which we have action in about 20 minutes. So I got to jump off this here soon. But for those of you all that would like a safe, supportive, emotional fitness community, emotional fitness gym to be a part of, please check out eqgangster.com. There'll be some information on the EQ Mafia at eqgangster.com. Emotionally healthy people help heal other people emotionally. Do an emotional fitness assessment for your own life today or soon this week. Set a time to do that. An emotional fitness audit. It's kind of like a emotional fitness test, a PT test, physical fitness test, physical training test, to find out where are you starting from? Where are you starting this emotional growth journey from? Because doing that emotional fitness audit will increase the chances of long-term success if you get a really good idea of where you're starting at today.